George Groves is fighting Andrea de Luisa. Andrea de Luisa. I'm sure, like many of you, when I heard this news, I reached for BoxRec. I thought, I don't remember that name. Let's have a look and see who he's been in with. Only to discover that Andrea is the second highest rated super middleweight from Italy. I then had a good minute to myself when I was trying to work out who the top rated super middleweight from Italy was, and I couldn't work it out. It's a bloke called Giovanni. Maybe we'll cover that elsewhere, maybe not. But George Groves is stepping in with Andrea de Luisa. The record of this guy is 18 wins, 14 of those 18 coming by knockout, with 3 losses. Of his 3 losses, 2 have come within the distance. As I understand it, he retired at the end of the 7th round against Christopher Rubrasse. Rubrasse will probably be familiar to George Groves fans, because obviously those two fought previously. Secondarily, he got stopped in 4 rounds by Lucien Boutte. Now, Lucien Boutte is obviously a capable operator, surprised many people by his performance against James DeGale. I've never thought of Lucien Boutte as an electric puncher. Certainly, Christopher Rubrasse is not the biggest puncher in the world. The fact he only went 4 with Boutte, the fact he only went 7 with Rubrasse, would suggest, on first appearances, that this should be easy work for George Groves. You know, George Groves, as we know, is a pretty big puncher. You know, people disagree with that, but you forget, George Groves got rid of Paul Smith in 2 rounds. This is the same Paul Smith who went 9 or 10 with DeGale, went the distance twice with Arthur Abraham, went 8 or 9 with Andre Ward. You know, George Groves can hit. He dropped Carl Frott so heavily with a punch that would have knocked down a tree in that first fight. Groves is a big puncher. He carries a lot of power. And for me, when the opponent has been stopped by Boutte, by Rubrasse, it suggests an early night. Having said that, there's some questions as to how George Groves' power has changed since he left Adam Booth. People suggest that Adam Booth is a very good trainer for developing people's power, as you know, he's famously known for David Haye, Andy Lee, now Chris Eubank Jr. Is that the case? I don't know, but certainly George Groves didn't seem to have the same power when he was fighting Dennis Douglin or when he was fighting Badou Jack. You know, on both of those occasions, I thought that George Groves' power may be too much for the opponent. Dennis Douglin, was a light middleweight, not in George Groves' class, but I thought Groves would get rid of him in the first round, but it didn't quite happen that way, So I think we have to look at George Groves' game. Obviously, he's come in from some heavy losses. The 2 losses by stoppage to Carl Frotz, the 12-round fight against Badou Jack, and it'll be a good assessment to see where he's at. How's he looking? How seriously is he in condition? I've said before previously, I think Groves should seriously be considering £175. I think he might be less weight drained, have a better chin, have better stamina, maybe even hit harder at that weight. I think he'd be a weapon at 175, whereas I think he comes up slightly short at 168. But anyway, against this guy, it looks likely Groves will have enough. I'm going to be honest, I haven't seen much of the opponent. No, let me rephrase that. I haven't seen anything of the opponent. I do promise to look into him, maybe try and watch some footage on him to give a more detailed stylistic breakdown, which will inform a prediction ahead of this fight. This is simply initial thoughts, initial reaction to the announcement that this is the opponent. And based on that, looking at the fact that this is the second best super middleweight in Italy, who's lost 3 times, being stopped by Boutte, retiring to Rubrasse, my instinct is that George Groves, even if he is only an 80% George Groves, will have too much for this guy. Groves is a smart boxer. Groves is a big puncher. This guy isn't really in his league. For those who are attending the Copper Box show, possibly a disappointing opponent. You'd have wanted to have seen more of a scrap. But I guess this is realistic level for Groves to make his return at. Obviously, he's had some difficult times and he needs to get back into the groove, get some momentum back into his career. And I guess 18-3 isn't the worst record, even though the guy looks beatable. There could be worse comeback opponents. Possibly not worse comeback opponents if you want to legitimately headline a show rather than appear on an undercard. And I do think Groves is headlining the show with the likes of Ryder Kamitsky on the undercard. That's an interesting fight. Wouldn't be surprised if there was an upset there as well. Let me know your thoughts. Do you know anything about this opponent? Hopefully you know more about him than me. What does he look like in the ring? Decent fighter. Can anyone see anything but a George Groves stoppage win? Let me know your thoughts. Many thanks for watching.